Shabbat shalom to everyone. Man, what a packed house we have today. Everybody heard it was going to be cool, right? So they stayed home. That's what it was. The cold front moving in. Well, just think about cool things and it'll be good. I had a teacher in high school that she used to hang coats in her car in the summertime. She said it's all the power of your mind. And it is to a certain extent, right? If you tell yourself that, oh, I'm just hot, I'm hot. Oh, man, I'm hot. You're going to be really hot. Anyway, we're going to do a little mining on that subject in our Torah portion. Maybe. Ah, there it is. It was hiding. All right. I know that all of y'all spend a lot of time studying these Torah portions and trying to track down the meaning of these Hebrew words and so on and so forth. So won't bore you too much for that. But what we are going to do is, in this Torah portion is chock full of different subjects. We could spend all day going over these subjects and really get some good things. But I chose to go one particular subject that kind of hits home, I think, for most of us and the society and the world that we find ourselves living in. And it's stated in Numbers 11, starting with verse 1. So we're going to kind of delve into this and see if how it applies to us and see where we land. Numbers 11:1 says, when the people complained, it displeased Yahweh. And Yahweh heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of Yahweh burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto Yahweh, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of Yahweh burnt among them. Interesting that starts this particular chapter with this people complaining, and to the point that he angers the Father. You know, we've kind of got the idea, and we've been kind of taught that we serve nothing but a loving God, and he's all love. He doesn't kill. He doesn't do any of those types of things. Yet, we see throughout the Old Testament in particular, and even into the New, that Yahweh does sometimes portray his anger. So, that's a little bit of the other part of that word, fear. Because we always look at the fear as reverence, honor, all these different things, which it is. But there is also the side of judgment that we haven't really seen in our time manifested in a physical manner that they saw in the Old Testament. But we know that day is coming. Because when he returns, he's bringing forth judgment. Either judgment for righteousness or judgment for wickedness. And so that is a part of God that we need to look at, part of Yahweh that we need to look at and see kind of how that we fit into this whole scenario and plan. Are we complainers? Let's just think about that a minute. And this is actually before the thing that we're going to go into. So evidently there had been two incidences of the people complaining to the point that it angered and brought forth the fire of Yahweh. So as we go on, it says, and the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? To me, these are two separate incidences that's portrayed here. One is the fire of complaining, And this is the lusting. Sometimes those things are one and the same, but not always. We sometimes complain because that we don't get what we want, something that we want or lusted after. Or sometimes we just complain because we like to complain. You ever done that? Surely not. Surely you've never complained just for complaining, right? It says, we remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. That word freely kind of sticks out, doesn't it? Did truly they ate fish freely? It didn't cost them anything? I think it cost them a lot because they were in servitude unto the Pharaohs and his men. If it didn't work, they certainly didn't get fish. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. Most of the rabbis and sages say that manna was such that it tasted whatever you wanted it to taste like. If you were hungry for watermelon, well, it tasted like watermelon. If you were hungry for a steak, maybe it tasted like a steak, maybe. Interesting concept. The Bible doesn't really says other than here that it says it was like coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. Of course, most seeds, even wheat, we can consider it a seed, would be ground and made into flour to bake or to cook or whatever you want to do with it. But it was not to their liking. And we know the whole story of manna. In reality, it was not only God providing substance every day for them, but was also a test for them. Because he told them, it says, 6 days a week it'll fall. You go out and gather what you need just for that day. Because if you try to gather more, it'll spoil. But on the sixth day, you gather twice as much, because on the Shabbat, it will not fall. Because you do not have to go out and labor and work on God's Shabbat. He's going to provide. That's something that we find akin to where we live and the society we live in and what we are told. Oh, brother, you must work. If you're going to make a living and take care of your family, you must work 6 days, 7 days, whatever I want you to work. Because if you don't, you're not really providing for your family. But that's not what God set up, was it? He says, if you'll do what the Shabbat says to do, you not have to worry about your substance being provided for. But here's the problem that we run into. In our society today, we have lost the distinction between wants and needs. Our wants have become our needs. But God says, I will provide your needs. I'm not necessarily going to provide your wants. Just because that you want something, that you think that you want it to the point that, oh, Father, I need it. No, he says, I am the bread of life, and I will provide you your substance. But it's awful hard as human beings to rely upon that. We've been taught just the opposite. That if you don't work, you don't eat. If you got to work the Shabbat, it's okay because you got to eat. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it into meals or beat it into a mortar and baked it in pans and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as a taste of fresh oil. You know, if we thought we wanted to taste something that tasted like fresh oil, we're going like, nah, I don't think so. So it must have been more to it than that. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man the door of his tent. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled greatly. And Moses also was displeased. Here once again, anger of Yahweh was kindled greatly, because the people wept to the point that they wept. Can you imagine? Father, I just don't like this stuff. I got to have something better than this. And Moses said unto Yahweh, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? So it's even pushed Moses to the edge a little bit. And he's going like, he's doing a little bit of complaining himself, isn't he, to the Father. He says, man, what we've done, you have done everything for these people. And I have also followed your commands and told these people. Yet all they want to do is gripe and complain. He says, why'd you lay this burden upon me, all these people? Gee. Have I conceived all of this people? Well, in a sense, he has, hasn't he? Because the majority of these people are after the seed of Abraham. Those that are not of the mixed multitude can be grafted, or in the process of being grafted into his family, right? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in my bosom, as a nursing father bears a sucking child into the land which thou swore unto their fathers? It says, where should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they wept unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I'm not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me, Father. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me now, get it over with. I pray thee out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, let me not see the evil. Wow. Don't we live in a world full of evil? Do we pray to the Father for that evil? That he protect us and guide us from that evil. But you know, he's put the same job on each one of us that he put on Moses. He says, go forth into the world and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and to preach the gospel to people that we have not born up. They're not of our descent. Yet he has given us that job. In the midst of an evil and perverse generation, as he called it. It says, and Yahweh said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them into the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon you, and will put it upon them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that thou bear it not thyself alone. Well, isn't this the same thing that took place at the Lord's Supper, right? When Yeshua said he breathed upon the disciples a measure of his Spirit. Because he knew that once he went through the trials and things he had to, that he would be gone. And for them to carry out the commission that he had laid upon them, that they were going to need a measure of the Spirit. And he's willing and able and ready to lay a measure of the Spirit upon each one of us. Because we're called under this great commission to teach the message of the last hour of the world's history here. And say unto the people, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and you shall eat flesh, for you have wept in the ears of Jehovah, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Was it really? You know, it kind of reminds us, you know, all of us have been through this, or said it even maybe yourselves. You know, I remember back in the good old days, you know, when you really stop and analyze that, were they really good old days? Not necessarily. We have a short memory of those things. It says, therefore Yahweh will give you flesh, and you shall eat. You shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days. He says, I'm going to show you that it's not really going to be good for you. Basically, to the same extent that we see what happened in the Garden of Eden. Once again, what happened there was a little word called appetite. We don't think much of it when we read in Genesis there where that the serpent beguiled Eve, but what was it all over? Appetite. He told her, says, if you eat of this fruit, you'll be like the Most High. You'll be able to see like he sees. You'll live forever. He appealed to her appetite. Same way that we find ourselves in this world today having the same problem sometimes. Because particularly when you speak the words of the Father where he says for the things that we should eat and the things that we shouldn't eat, and you read that to people, immediately there's a wall that's thrown up. Oh no. You can talk to me about anything except what I want to eat. It comes down to that carnal nature that we're going to have what we want. You know, I had a man that worked for me. He was had been in foster care, and he was in his later early teen years. He was taken in by a man that had his own business, and he was a Shabbat keeper. And so he raised him basically that, taught him about the Sabbath and so on forth, taught him clean and unclean foods. And so when we basically settled on a place on 7th Street and began to have meetings and things there, he was working for me at the time. And he said, well, I think I'll come to your church. He said, but I'm not going to quit eating pork. And I'm going like, wow. I never said anything about it, you know. Never even mentioned it. So it comes down to that old carnal desires, carnal nature. As we go on in Numbers, it says, but even a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you because that you have despised Yahweh. Wow. I never heard a word of that coming out of the mixed multitude. I hate God. I wish He never brought me out here because I just hate Him. No, we didn't hear that, did we? All we heard was, we would like to have, we want meat. But in Jehovah's eyes, it was that they despised him. What he had done for them was not good enough for them. What he had brought them through and out of slavery into a free nation and performed miracles, spoke to them, uttered his word unto them that they actually heard the Father's words, was not good enough for them. You provided us water when we wanted it. You provided us manna when we needed it. Yet that wasn't good enough. So Father says, since they despise me, okay, I'm going to give them what they want. And Moses said, the people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen. If you remember in last week's Torah portion, that was the numbering that was going on by tribes. How many? And these were just men over the age of 20 that were able to go to war, is what they counted. And there was over 600,000 men over 20 years of age. So you can imagine how many actual people were there, counting wives and children and all these types of things. And you said, I will give them flesh, that they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? You know, that's an interesting question. Here they had all of the cattle, all the sheep, all the goats, all those things that they come with them out of Egypt. Yet it seems that they were not eating them. Isn't that interesting? They were basically used for sacrifice in the worship in the temple. Just like in the Garden of Eden. He provided them their substance, and it was not meat. Interesting. Yet we see that this whole journey that we're on as humanity, that God is trying to bring us back and reestablish us in the Garden of Eden. And when we get to the Garden of Eden, are we going to be able to control our appetite? Are we going to be able to control our wants? Or are we going to say, I don't like that place right there you got for me. I need one that's got an air conditioner and needs a spa in it also, because my hip, it kind of hurts. And Yahweh said unto Moses, is Yahweh's hand waxed short? See, in our human thinking, we're like Moses says, well, how in the world are you going to do that? You want me to go out and kill all the animals that we have to feed these people? He says, don't you think that I can do anything that needs to be done? How many miracles have I shown you? How many rods have you thrown down and become snakes and serpents that ate up other serpents? How many rocks have split and let the water gushed out of? How many waters have you made sweet that you could drink? And Moses went out and told the people the words of Yahweh, and gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people and set them round about the tabernacle. Interesting. Set these elders round about the tabernacle. And Yahweh came down in a cloud and spake unto him, and took of the Spirit that was upon him, and gave it unto the 70 elders. And it came to pass that when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, and they did not again. We see these same words, even Paul talks about the different offices. And when you really chase it down, prophesying is, we kind of come to the idea that prophesying is someone that can tell the future. It's not necessarily what prophesying is. Scripture shows that when you speak God's word, you're prophesying. Because everything is in the word already. It says, and Moses gat him into the camp, and he and the elders of Israel. And there went forth a wind from Jehovah, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and it was 2 cubits high. That much deep in quail. Can you imagine even trying to walk 2 cubits? The cubit is somewhere around 16 to 18 inches, supposedly from here to the tip of your finger. 2 of those deep. Wow. And the people stood up all day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. And he that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all about abroad for themselves round about the camp. So evidently they dressed them, and evidently tried to dry them in the sun, I guess. Because they didn't have any refrigeration, right? Yet these people diligently worked, well, let's see, 24, about 48 hours, right? 48 hours, probably without even taking a break. At least when they were in captivity, they didn't work 24 hours a day. Yet, everything they got was free, supposedly. Here they worked diligently for 48 hours for this. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of Yahweh was kindled against the people. And Yahweh smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattavan. And that's not even close to being how you pronounce that. Because what it means is the graves of the longing. Because they buried the people that lusted at that place. They never really say how many, but it must have been a bunch. 600,000 men. We're really not told if everybody or the mixed multitude or whatever. In this walk, we want to blame, though, all of these things upon the mixed multitude. Oh, well, those mixed multitude people, they're Edomites, They're there to kill, destroy, and separate us from the Father. How easy it is to blame somebody else, isn't it? For their lack of obedience. It's always, well, he did it, why can't I do it? So that's the story, and we're going to just look into see if we can bring any life lessons out of this. Because if we just look at it as a story and say, well, those crazy old Jews, they're always doing something wrong. If I'd been there, I wouldn't have done that. I'd been smarter than that. So we're going to look at some life lessons. How in the world could a group of people who had just been freed after years of slavery been shown miracle upon miracles and have every one of their needs provided for, still somehow manage to complain about nothing? And we think, well, surely there was something. Had to been something or they wouldn't have been complaining. That's why I was saying a while ago, Have you ever complained because of nothing? Just because you wanted to complain? You think, well, no, I wouldn't do that. The answer lies in the extraordinary way in which Yahweh has designed us. When it comes to our daily thoughts, which are the precursors to all of our actions, Yahweh wired us in a fascinating way. Our minds easily and naturally focus on what we're lacking. This bears repeating. Our minds will easily and naturally focus on what we do not have. It takes actual effort for us to think about the blessings of what we do have. You ever experienced any of that? Have you ever really thought about that? You know, it seems to be part of our human nature, but it's not what's best for us. As we go on, we're going to read some more. It says, our mind can be likened to a garden. The soil will bring forth most anything that you want to plant in it. But if you don't plant anything, you won't have any crops. You'll get weeds growing instead. If anybody's ever had a garden knows that. The weeds will grow faster and better than anything that you do plant. Even they'll grow even without much water. It says, without the seeds, the land doesn't just remain barren. Weeds will grow in abundance. This analogy is a true gateway to the understanding why most people walk around unhappy and with absolutely no zest for life. Are you unhappy? Do you lack that zest for life? Do you ask, what in the world am I doing here? Oh, another day in paradise. I've heard that quite often. How's it going? What are you doing? Oh, it's another day in paradise. In reality, it is. Right? What other place could you be than where God has placed you? In the manifold blessings that He's poured out upon you. In the provisions that He's made for you. Unless you make a conscious decision to focus on something positive, then by default your mind will simply and easily drift towards negative and unproductive thoughts. Have you ever experienced that or even thought about it? Because if you don't fill your thoughts with positive things of what's going on, what you need to do, what the Father's done, and Hasatan is sitting there on your shoulder saying, you know, you really got it real bad. You know, it could be a lot better than this. You know, you could have a really nice job, make a lot of money, you know, if you just get away from that other crazy guy. Negative and unproductive thoughts. The people had been given everything from Jehovah. Their lives, their freedom, and all of their physical needs were provided for with little or no effort. But instead of being overjoyed beyond belief by focusing on what they now had, the Israelites allowed their minds to remain barren, whereby they naturally complained about all the things that they didn't have, because they didn't focus on what they had. God knew that there was no way He could ever make them happy, and the wrath of God flared greatly. There's no amount of blessings that could ever make someone happy if he chooses to not think about them. So if you're spending a lot of time thinking about all the things that you don't have, all of the bad things that's happened in your life, all the things that God has not answered your prayer about, that, Father, you know I need this and this and this, and pretty soon that's all that consumes you is what you don't have, the bad part of life. You know, the old song that was popular probably in the 70s, I never promised you a rose garden. Some of us older people know what that song is. But in reality, that's what the Father says. I never promised you a rose garden. Told you it was going to be tough. Told you that you need to count the cost. Told you to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. I told you, though, to rely on me, that I would never leave you destitute. Everything Jehovah gave them made them ecstatic for a day, and then their focus switched from elation to what's now lacking. I'm sure that probably all of you's maybe experienced it yourself, but maybe in your children you've seen this. Maybe back when you were keeping Christmas and you went out and bought all these toys for your kids, and on that morning when you opened, or the night before, whatever that you did, you opened those presents and you gave to them, all those children were just so happy. They were just jumping all around and just excited and so on and so forth. But about a day or two later, that adrenaline had stopped, and they said, man, that was nice. But what can you do for me next? What's the next big thing? You're laughing because that you've seen it, right? Haven't you experienced that? Maybe you experienced it in yourself. When you really focused on one particular thing that you thought would really make you happy and then everything, and then when you got it, it was kind of a letdown. And you're going like, well, and our society is built upon that. Why do you think that every year that they come out with a new cell phone? It does the same thing as the old cell phone did. It calls, makes calls and receives calls, and so on and so forth. But the anticipation of getting something brand new that nobody else has, and it's going to do this for me, and it's going to do that for me, and this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Within a year, you're going like, man, that wasn't much better than the one I had. You know? In fact, if I still had my old flip phone, it does the same thing for me. Yeah. We have been brainwashed or trained or whatever it is to that. To create a need for that. See, it's been put forth as, well, you need this. Because, you know, you can hook it up to your front door and all the windows, and you can on your phone say, lock my door, or you can say, well, who's at my door? You need this. In reality, it's a want. And this is the powerful life-changing lesson for all of us. For a life of peace and blissfulness, it's absolutely mandatory to take time each and every day to really and truly think about the blessings that God has showered upon you. Remember, a lack of appreciation and awareness is the first step towards unhappiness. You know, no one or no thing can make you happy. Yet we struggle every day with that. Everything that's marketed it's marketed on the pretext that this will make you happy. This will make you sexy. This will make you thin. This will make you, everybody will love you. And on and on and on and on. Where in reality, happiness only comes from within, right? It says, take the time to really thank the one who gives and gives and gives, and stop focusing on the things that at this moment you don't have. Fill your mental garden with only the right kind of thoughts and watch in amazement how you'll have more and more to be thankful for. Philippians 4:4-6 says, rejoice in Yahweh always. And again I say, rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The sovereign is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto Elohim. With thanksgiving. Going on in Philippians 4 says, and the peace of Elohim which passeth all understanding shall keep your hearts and minds through the Messiah, Yeshua. That's why he says, let the mind of Yeshua be in you. Because he didn't chase things of the world, did he? In fact, he told him, says, don't even take thought of what you're going to wear or what you're going to say or what you're going to do. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Not on what you don't have, not on what you want. Those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do. The Elohim of peace shall be with you. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. There's a word, foreign word in our English language, content. You mean we're supposed to be content with what we got? But Father, I want that. I need that. I need that $74 million airplane. Yeah, there's another one out there asking for $74 million for a jet airplane. He already owns one or two of them already, but he's got to have another one. God told him to ask for it because you need it. Content. That word gets misconstrued as contempt. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through the Messiah which strengthens me. If you put that thought in your mind, if it becomes part of your life, then there's nothing that you cannot accomplish in the God's work. But my Elohim shall supply all of my needs according to his riches and dignity by the Messiah Yeshua. Now unto Elohim and our Father be praised forever and ever. Amen. Supply all of your needs. He's not supplying all your needs. You need to take an inventory. What's going on in your life? If your needs become your wants. Luke 3. Then said he to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, O generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come? This is John the Baptist in the wilderness. Bring forth, therefore, fruits worthy of repentance, and begin not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father, so we're not worried about it. For I say unto you that Elohim is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. And now also the axe is laid unto the root of the tree. Every tree, therefore, which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. And the people asked him, saying, well then, what shall we do? That's a good question. And he answered and said unto them, he that hath two coats, let him impart to him that has none. And he that hath food, let him do likewise. That was the whole thing about the rich young ruler. One, he asked, what shall I do to be saved? He said all these different things. Well, I've kept the 10 Commandments. I've kept all your commandments. I've done this, I've done that, done this, done that. What else do I need to do to be saved? What did he say? He says, sell all that you have and give it to the poor. Because I'm going to fulfill your needs, and I'm going to fulfill the needs of other people through your needs. Then came also publicans to be baptized, and said unto him, Teacher, what shall we do? And he said unto them, exact no more than which is appointed unto you. And the soldiers likewise demanded of him, saying, and what shall we do? And he said unto them, do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. Well, that's not a word that's used in the oil field. No, I'm worth $30 an hour, you know. John answered, saying unto them all, I indeed baptize you with water, but one mightier than I cometh, the latchet of whose shoes I am not worthy to unloose. He shall baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor, and will gather the wheat into his garner, but the chaff he will burn with fire unquenchable. All of this is judgment language, isn't it? He's going to take his fan and thoroughly purge his floor. This is so akin to our way of thinking, because we're not a society that is a farm. But what anybody that does any of this knows exactly what he's talking about. This is in the time of harvest, when you bring the wheat in, or whatever it is that you're harvesting, and you beat the kernels out of it. And I'm sure you've probably seen where that they would winnow the wheat. When they beat it all in here, then they'd put it in pans and they'd throw it up in the air. The wheat being heavy, it would fall to the ground. The chaff would blow away. That's what he's saying, that the Yeshua will thoroughly purge his floor, just like he did in our story. He was burning off the chaff. But the chaff will be burned with fire unquenchable. This is in Hebrews 13. Let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. And this was a household staple in my house when I was raised. We truly practiced that. My mother and dad didn't ever see a stranger that she didn't either take home or take him some food or give him some clothes or whatever it was. In fact, if we're going down the road and somebody's hitchhiking, she'd tell my dad, stop. And we would pick him up and we'd take them where they wanted to go, usually feed them. says, remember them that are in bonds, as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourself also in the same body. Let your manner of life be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, Yahweh is my helper. It's not that he doesn't want you to have things, good things, and so on and so forth. He wants you to depend on him to supply that. Not for you to go out and get it on your own. Remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of Elohim, whose faith follow, considering the end of their manner of life. Yeshua the Messiah the same yesterday, today, and forever. Be not carried about with divers and strange doctrines, for it is a good thing that the heart be established with grace, not with meats, which have not profited them that have been occupied therein. If you're more worried about where your next meal is coming from than what the Father has done or going to do for you. Hebrews 13 says, we have an altar, therefore, whereof they have no right to eat, which serve the tabernacle. Interesting. Just listen to these words. It says, we have an altar, whereof they have no right to eat, which serve the tabernacle. For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned without the camp. Wherefore Yeshua also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate. I don't know if you fully understood what was being said there. The tabernacle and the temple service there was coming fastly to an end. In fact, it did come to an end. What Paul is writing to the Hebrews, because the Hebrews had an understanding of the temple service and the sanctuaries. It says we have an altar better than that altar right there. Let us go forth therefore unto him and without the camp, bearing his reproach. For here have we no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. Because Yeshua told him that Jerusalem would be destroyed. In fact, he gave him a prophecy, and he told him what to do when he saw it happening. It says when the army comes and surrounds the city and pulls back, it says flee out. And that's exactly what happened. When Titus come back, because they besieged the city for quite some time, and for no apparent reason, they pulled their army out and left. They besieged the city originally on the day of Tabernacles, Sukkot. They pulled out, and 3.5 years later, on the day of Passover, they re-entered and actually took and burned the city of Jerusalem. Three and a half years. Interesting. If you'd been living in that period of time, would you have remembered what Yeshua said? Would you have been in touch enough with his word to say, hey, I remember he said that when they pull out, you need to get out of here. We just said, oh, well, they got scared. We run them off. They knew that Jerusalem was too strong for them to take. Or maybe you left, and 2 years later, you're always the people that you knew in Jerusalem is saying, you bunch of crazy fools. What are y'all doing out there? 3.5 years. It says, for here we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. That is the New Jerusalem that cometh down. By him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise to Elohim continually. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. 1 Timothy, but holiness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. As the old saying goes, never seen a hearse with a luggage rack or a U-Haul trailer hooked to it. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolishness and hurtful lust, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some covet after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. It's not the money. It's your covetousness. It's your want. What you do with that money. Charge them that are rich in this world that they be not high-minded nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living Yahweh, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. That they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. Laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on everlasting life. Oscar Wilde famously said, there are two problems with life. He only thought, well, there's only two problems? I got a whole bunch of problems. There are two problems with life. Sometimes you don't get what you want, and sometimes you do. And it really wasn't the good thing that you thought it was going to be. The most unhappy people are the ones that got what they wanted in life. The other people are unhappy too, just not as bad, because they think there is a reason that they are unhappy. The ones who got what they wanted don't know why it isn't helping them. Well, I feel the same way as I did before. That's why you see all these billionaires that have billions of dollars of houses all over the world. And most of them never spend maybe one night a year in them. It says some people need to get what they want to realize it won't make them happy, and some people are willing to think. If you thought that something tomorrow was going to solve all your problems and thinking that would make you happy now, it means that your mind controls your happiness now. And that thing won't do you any good because it isn't making you happy. Your thinking is. Therefore, you can have the best life possible if you are willing to think. Just read a lot of the self-help books that come out of the 70s and 80s. Think and Grow Rich. How to win friends and influence enemies. The power of positive thinking. All of those things are based upon biblical foundations. It says complaining is almost always non-specific. We are looking for something to complain about. And we find it. If you want to complain, you will. We can stay at the best 5-star hotel and complain that the concierge stopped smiling for a moment, or the tea was a touch too strong or too weak, or the carpets were too soft, or our pews is too hard. says, there is no such thing as perfection. Wow. There's only one person that's ever perfect in this world. So if we are looking, we will always find the flaw. Even though the person complaining thinks precisely the opposite, complaining has nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with attitude. If our attitude is bad enough, we will even complain about manna coming down from heaven and tasting like anything that we wanted it to taste like. But why do we complain? The problem is with expectations. The higher our expectations, the more upset we feel when life doesn't live up to them. The less we expect, the more likely we are to see the good in whatever comes our way. I would venture to say that expectations will never contribute to our happiness. They will only ever undermine it. If we can learn to see the good in everything in our life, every person that we meet, every family member that we have, can we see the good in them? Or are we always going like, man, you know, my brother-in-law, he's this and this and that and the other. And expect perfection and life will always disappoint you. Expect very little and life will always surprise you. Life and all that is within it is a blessing that God has bestowed upon us, unmerited and undeserved. Seeing it that way will fill us with gratitude and grant us immunity from complaining. Don't complain, just relax and Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for watching a teaching from Emet HaTorah. If you are ever in the Odessa area, we would love to welcome you to our Shabbat service, 11 a.m. every Sabbath. For more information or for more teachings, feel free to find us on the web, www.emethatorohodessa.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you and your family. Shalom.